The knock didn't sound human. That's the only way I can explain it now, too precise, too final. Not the hesitant tap of a neighbor or the casual rhythm of a delivery. This was something else. Measured. Decisive. Like whoever stood on the other side already knew my life was about to split in two. I glanced at the clock on my nightstand. 6:12 a.m. No one brings good news at 6:12 in the morning. I slipped out of bed carefully, trying not to wake the kids. The house was still wrapped in that soft, early silence, floorboards cool under my feet, the faint hum of the refrigerator down the hall. For a brief second, I remember thinking maybe it was a mistake. Wrong house. Wrong door. The knock came again. Louder this time. I opened the door. 3 people stood there. 2 in plain clothes, 1 in uniform. "Are you Daniel Reeves?" the woman in front asked, her voice calm in a way that immediately made me uneasy. "Yes. What's going on?" She held up a badge. "Child Protective Services. We need to come inside." I didn't move. "I think you have the wrong." "We have a report," the officer interrupted, not unkindly, but firm. "It's important we talk inside." Something in his tone, something practiced, made my chest tighten. This wasn't confusion. This wasn't a mistake. I stepped aside. They entered like they'd done this 100 times before, eyes scanning everything, the hallway, the family photos, the shoes by the door. The woman gestured toward the living room. "Let's sit." I didn't sit. "What report?" I asked, my voice already starting to fray at the edges. "What is this about?" The second CPS worker, a man with a tablet in his hands, avoided eye contact. The woman looked directly at me. "We've received an allegation involving your adopted son." My stomach dropped, fast and violent, like missing a step in the dark. "An allegation of what?" She paused. And in that pause, my entire body went cold, like some part of me already knew the word before she said it. "Abuse." I actually laughed. It slipped out of me, sharp, disbelieving. No, that's not possible. There's been some kind of misunderstanding." The officer shifted slightly behind her, his presence suddenly heavier. The woman continued, her voice still steady, almost rehearsed. "Your son disclosed that you engaged in inappropriate conduct." "Inappropriate, what does that even mean?" My voice rose. "You need to be specific because this is insane." The man with the tablet finally spoke, reading like he didn't want the words to belong to him. He stated. He swallowed, eyes flicking up to me for half a second. "He sexually assaulted me." The room tilted. For a second, I thought I might actually pass out. The edges of my vision blurred, sound collapsing into this dull, roaring pressure in my ears. "No," I said. "No. He didn't say that." But even as I said it, something inside me cracked open, because I knew exactly who he was. Ethan. My son. The boy I had spent 3 years fighting to adopt. Court dates. Home studies. Background checks. The endless paperwork, the interviews, the waiting. The day the judge finalized it, Ethan had squeezed my hand so tightly I thought my fingers would break. "You chose me," he'd whispered. "And now?" "No," I said again, louder this time. He wouldn't say that. He couldn't. The woman didn't argue. Instead, she nodded toward the hallway. "Where are the children now?" "They're asleep," I said automatically. "We're going to need to speak with them." A spike of panic shot through me. "You're not waking them up. Not for this. Not for something that isn't even real." "Mr. Reeves," she said, her tone shifting just slightly, "based on the nature of the allegation, we are initiating an emergency removal." The words didn't make sense. Removal? "We will be placing the children in temporary protective custody while the investigation proceeds." It felt like the air had been sucked out of the room. "You're taking my kids?" I said, the words barely forming. "You can't just walk in here and take my kids because of something like this." The officer stepped forward now, not aggressive, but unmistakably present. "Sir, we're asking you to cooperate." My heart was pounding so hard it hurt. "This is a mistake," I said, shaking my head. "You need to talk to Ethan again. He's confused. Someone put something in his head. This isn't real." No one responded. And that silence. It was worse than anything they could have said. From down the hall, I heard movement. Small footsteps. A door creaking open. "Dad?" My youngest. Half awake, voice soft and uncertain. I turned instinctively, my entire body pulling toward that sound. But the CPS worker moved first. "Sweetheart," she said gently, stepping past me, "we're here to help, okay? Help." The word echoed in my skull like something broken. I stood there, frozen, as strangers walked deeper into my home, into my children's rooms, into a life that, just minutes ago, had still belonged to me. And somewhere in the back of my mind, one thought kept repeating, over and over. This isn't happening. But it was. And it was only the beginning. I don't remember sitting down. One moment I was standing in the hallway, trying to make sense of strangers in my home. The next, I was on the couch, staring at my hands like they belonged to someone else. Everything felt distant, muffled, like my life had been pushed behind glass and I couldn't reach it anymore. But one thing stayed clear. Too clear. He sexually assaulted me. The words didn't feel real. They didn't connect to anything I knew, anything I had lived. They just echoed, over and over, like a sentence from the wrong story, forced into mine. Ethan. I saw him the way he used to be when he first came home, quiet, careful, always watching. It had taken months before he laughed freely. Longer before he stopped asking permission just to grab a snack or sit next to me. Trust had been slow. Earned. Real. And now, somehow, it was gone in a single sentence. Mr. Reeves. I looked up. The caseworker stood nearby, composed, focused. Not unkind, but distant. We need to ask a few questions. I nodded faintly. Okay. Can you describe your relationship with your son? The question felt strange in that moment, but I answered anyway. He's my kid, I said. I chose him. I take care of him. I show up for him every day. That's what matters. He typed something into his tablet. Have there ever been any prior concerns raised about your household? No, I said. Because there's never been a reason. Another note. Another quiet pause. In the hallway, I could hear soft voices again, gentle, measured. The kind of tone people use when they're guiding a child through something serious. That word stuck with me. Guiding. I stood up slowly. Can I talk to him? The answer came quickly. Not right now. I'm not trying to interfere, I said. I just want to understand what's happening. I understand, he replied, though it didn't feel like he did. But we need to follow protocol. Protocol. It sounded clean. Organized. But nothing about this felt that way. A moment later, I saw Ethan in the hallway. He stood slightly behind the other caseworker, shoulders tense, eyes lowered. He looked smaller somehow, not physically, but emotionally. Like he was carrying something too heavy for him. Ethan, I said gently. He didn't respond. I took a careful step closer, keeping my voice calm. Hey. It's okay. You can talk to me. The caseworker beside him spoke softly. You're doing okay. Again, that certainty. Like everything had already been decided. Ethan, I tried again, just look at me for a second. He did, briefly. And in that moment, I didn't see fear. I saw confusion. Uncertainty, something unfinished. Did something happen? I asked quietly, choosing my words carefully, or are you trying to explain something that's hard to say? The room felt still. He hesitated. Just for a second. I already told them, he said. The words were simple. Controlled. But they didn't carry the weight I expected. They felt distant. Like he was repeating something instead of owning it. My chest tightened. You can always talk to me, I said, softer now. No matter what. His eyes dropped again. No response. And that silence lingered longer than anything else. Not angry. Not fearful. Just uncertain. Things moved quickly after that. The house, once calm and familiar, became a place of motion and quiet urgency. My younger kids were confused, asking questions no one really answered. Bags were packed. Shoes were found. Coats pulled on. I followed them toward the door, my thoughts struggling to catch up. This doesn't make sense, I said, trying to stay steady. Something's off here. You can't just assume. We're taking precautions, the caseworker replied. Precautions. The word landed heavily. The door opened. Cold air filled the space. One by one, my children stepped outside. Ethan went last. For a moment, I thought he might turn around. He didn't. The door closed gently behind them. And just like that, the house fell silent again. But it wasn't the same silence as before. This one felt empty. I stood there, trying to hold on to something solid, some explanation, some logic that could make this feel real. But all I had was that moment. That brief look in Ethan's eyes. Not certainty. Not clarity. Something else. And as I stood there, alone in a house that no longer felt like mine, one thought stayed with me. Whatever had started this. It didn't start with him, the silence didn't hit all at once. At first, it was just space. Too much of it. The kind you don't notice until something that used to fill it is gone. I stood in the entryway long after the door closed, staring at the faint scuff marks on the floor where shoes had rushed through just minutes earlier. My youngest had kicked hers off halfway, like she always did when she was upset. One of them still sat crooked near the wall. I didn't move it. I couldn't. Because moving it meant accepting they weren't coming back tonight. And I wasn't ready for that. Eventually, my legs gave out, and I sat down right there on the floor, back against the wall, the house stretching out around me in this unnatural quiet. No cartoons humming in the background. No footsteps overhead. No small voices calling my name from another room. Just nothing. I pulled out my phone. No messages. No missed calls. No instructions. Just a blank screen that felt as empty as everything else. I opened my contacts and stared at Ethan's name. My thumb hovered over it. What was I supposed to do? Call him? Text him? Hey buddy, just checking in after you helped dismantle our entire life this morning? The thought made my chest tighten. I locked the phone and let it drop beside me. This isn't real, I muttered to no one. But the house didn't argue. It just sat there, hollow and still. Hours passed. I don't remember what I did with them. I think I walked from room to room at some point. Opened doors. Closed them again. Stood in places where something had happened before, like if I stayed long enough, I could rewind time just a few hours and catch the moment where everything went wrong. Ethan's room was the hardest. The bed was unmade, blanket half on the floor. A book sat open on his desk, something about space, pages bent at the corner where he'd stopped reading last night. Last night. He had asked me a question before bed. I remembered it clearly now. Do you ever regret it? I'd leaned against the doorframe. Regret what? Adopting me. The question had caught me off guard. No, I'd said immediately. Not for a second. He'd studied my face like he was trying to verify something. Okay, he'd said quietly. That was it. No hint. No warning. Nothing that told me by morning, my entire life would be unrecognizable. I sat down on the edge of his bed, staring at that same spot on the floor where he used to drop his backpack every day. You chose me. His voice echoed in my memory. So what changed? The first knock came around noon. Not the sharp, decisive kind from earlier. This one was hesitant. Curious. I opened the door to find Mrs. Alvarez from next door standing there, arms folded tightly across her chest. I saw the cars this morning, she said carefully. Everything okay? For a second, I considered lying. Saying it was a misunderstanding. Paperwork. Something harmless. But the words didn't come. No, I said instead. It's not. Her expression shifted, subtle, but enough. Concern. Mixed with something else. Something quieter. I'm sure it'll get sorted out, she said, though it sounded more like something she felt she should say rather than something she believed. Yeah, I replied. A pause stretched between us. Well, she added, stepping back slightly, if you need anything. She didn't finish the sentence. Didn't have to. Because we both knew things had already changed. After she left, I noticed the curtain across the street shift slightly. Someone watching. Of course they were. A CPS visit at dawn doesn't stay private for long. By late afternoon, my phone finally rang. Unknown number. I answered immediately. Hello? This is Carla Jennings with Child Services, a voice said on the other end. Professional. Neutral. I'm calling to inform you that your children have been placed in temporary care. Where? I asked. Are they together? Yes, they are currently placed together. A small relief. Not enough, but something. Can I talk to them? Not at this time. Why not? There are protocols in place during the initial stage of an investigation. Protocols again. Always that word. Listen, I said, forcing myself to stay calm, there's been a mistake. You need to re-interview Ethan. Something's not right. The way he said it, it didn't. Mr. Reeves, she interrupted gently, I understand this is difficult. You will have an opportunity to participate in the process. That's not good enough, I said, the frustration rising. My kids are gone. My son said something that isn't true, and no one is questioning it. We are conducting a full assessment, she replied. You'll be contacted regarding next steps. The call ended before I could say anything else. I lowered the phone slowly. Assessment. Process. Steps. All these words that sounded structured and reasonable, while my life sat in pieces around me. Evening came quietly. Too quietly. I didn't turn on the lights until it was almost dark. Didn't turn on the TV. Didn't cook. The idea of doing anything normal felt wrong, like pretending the day hadn't happened. I sat in the living room, staring at the empty couch across from me. That's where Ethan used to sit. Always with one leg tucked under him, remote in hand, flipping through shows he never actually watched. Pick something, I'd tell him. I am, he'd reply. He never was. I let out a slow breath, rubbing my hands over my face. Think, I muttered. Just think. Because this didn't come out of nowhere. It couldn't have. Kids don't just wake up and say something like that without a reason. There had to be a trigger. A conversation. Someone. And then. A memory surfaced. Uninvited. Unclear at first, then sharper. A name. One I hadn't thought about in months. Ethan's biological mother. The last time she'd reached out hadn't gone well. Demands. Accusations. Claims that I was turning him against her. That I was stealing him. I'd cut off contact after that. For Ethan's sake. For stability. But now. I sat up straighter, something cold settling in my chest. What if? The thought didn't fully form. Not yet. But it was there. Lingering. Because if Ethan's words didn't feel like his, then maybe they weren't. And if they weren't, then someone had put them there. The next morning didn't feel like a new day. It felt like a continuation of something that hadn't paused, like the night had just been a dimmer version of the same nightmare. I hadn't slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the same moment, Ethan standing in the hallway, not looking at me. Not angry. Not afraid. Just distant. Like he'd already been pulled somewhere I couldn't reach. By 7:30 a.m., I was sitting at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee I hadn't touched. My phone lay in front of me, screen dark, waiting. I didn't know what I was waiting for, a call, an explanation, someone to say we got it wrong. It didn't come. Instead, at 8:12, the phone rang. Same unknown number pattern. I answered immediately. Hello? Mr. Reeves, this is Investigator Hale with Child Services. I'll be handling your case moving forward. His voice was different from the others. Less soft. More precise. What does that mean? I asked. It means we'll be conducting a formal inquiry into the allegation, he said. I'll need you to come in today for an interview. Today? Yes. The sooner we begin, the better. I let out a slow breath, steadying myself. Fine. I'll be there. He gave me the address and a time, 10 a.m. 2 hours. 2 hours to prepare for a conversation that could decide everything. The building didn't look like I expected. No flashing signs. No obvious markers. Just a plain office structure, quiet and almost forgettable. If you didn't know what happened inside, you'd walk right past it. Maybe that was the point. Inside, everything felt controlled. Neutral colors. Minimal decoration. Chairs arranged too neatly. Even the air felt still, like it had been instructed not to carry too much emotion. A receptionist directed me down a hallway. Room 3, she said. The door was already open. Investigator Hale sat at a small table, a file in front of him. He looked up as I entered, mid-40s, composed, the kind of face that didn't reveal much. "Mr. Reeves," he said, standing briefly. "Have a seat." I sat across from him, the table between us feeling wider than it was. He opened the file. "I want to be clear about something before we begin," he said. "This is a fact-finding interview. Our goal is to understand what occurred from all perspectives." "That would be nice," I replied, unable to keep the edge out of my voice. He didn't react. "Let's start simple," he continued. "Tell me about your household." So I did. I told him about routines. School mornings. Homework at the kitchen table. Movie nights. The small, ordinary details that make up a life. He listened. Took notes, occasionally asked for clarification. But his face didn't change. Not once. "Now," he said eventually, "I'm going to ask you directly, have you ever engaged in any inappropriate behavior with your son?" "No," I said immediately. Not defensive. Not hesitant. Just the truth. He watched me for a moment, like he was measuring something I couldn't see. "Your son has provided multiple statements," he said carefully. "Some of them include specific descriptions." My chest tightened. "Descriptions of what?" I asked. He flipped a page in the file, glancing down briefly before speaking. "Descriptions of situations where he felt uncomfortable. Times he says boundaries were crossed." "Felt uncomfortable?" I repeated. "That's not the same as what he said." Hale looked up. "We're evaluating all aspects of the report." "No," I said, leaning forward slightly. "You're building something. Piece by piece. And you're starting with the assumption that it's true." "That's not accurate." "It feels accurate." A pause. "Then, calmly, then help me understand what's inaccurate." I exhaled slowly, forcing myself to stay grounded. "Ethan didn't sound like himself," I said. "When he spoke yesterday, it didn't feel natural. It felt rehearsed." Hale's pen stopped moving. "Rehearsed how?" "Like he was repeating something," I said. "Not explaining it. Not struggling to find words. Just delivering them." Hale studied me for a moment. "Children process experiences differently," he said. "I know that," I replied. "But I also know him. And that wasn't him." Silence settled between us. Then he asked, "Has anyone else had recent contact with your son outside of your household?" The question landed exactly where I'd been heading. "Yes," I said. "His biological mother." Hale's eyes sharpened, just slightly. "Tell me about that." I leaned back, thinking. "She reached out a few months ago," I said. "Wanted more contact. More involvement. It didn't go well." "In what way?" "She was aggressive," I said carefully. "Accusatory. Said I was keeping him from her. That I was changing him." Hale wrote something down. "Did she have direct communication with him?" "Not that I allowed," I said. "But I can't say for sure what happened outside of that. School. Online. I don't know." Another note. Another pause. Then Hale closed the file slightly, folding his hands. "We'll be looking into all relevant connections," he said. "That includes her?" I asked. "It includes anything that may provide context." Not a yes. Not a no. Just more careful language. The interview lasted over an hour. By the end of it, my throat felt dry, my head heavy. I'd answered every question. Repeated myself more times than I could count. Clarified, explained, corrected. And still, I had no sense of where I stood. Hale walked me to the door. "We'll be in touch," he said. "When?" I asked. "Soon." I almost laughed. "Everyone keeps saying that," I said. "But no one says what it actually means." He met my eyes then. "It means we're still building the full picture." I nodded slowly. "And if the picture's wrong?" He didn't answer. Outside, the air felt colder than it had that morning. I stood on the sidewalk for a moment, trying to steady myself. Descriptions. Boundaries. Statements. They were shaping something. Something that didn't belong to me, but was quickly becoming my reality. I pulled out my phone, scrolling absently. And then I saw it. A notification I'd missed earlier. An email. No subject line. Just a name I hadn't seen in months. My stomach tightened as I opened it. Ethan's biological mother. The message was short. "You should have let me be part of his life." That was it. No explanation. No context. Just that sentence. I stared at the screen, something cold settling deeper in my chest. Because it didn't feel random. It felt timed. Like she knew exactly what was happening. And for the first time since this started, I stopped wondering if something was wrong. And started wondering how far it went. I read the message 3 times. "You should have let me be part of his life." No greeting. No explanation. No denial of what was happening. Just blame. It didn't feel like coincidence. It felt like someone stepping into a scene they already understood. I stood there on the sidewalk outside the office building, the noise of passing cars distant and irrelevant, my focus locked entirely on those 11 words. My first instinct was to call her. Demand answers. Confront her directly. Force something out into the open. But I didn't. Because I already knew how that would go. She didn't argue like normal people. She redirected. Twisted. Turned every conversation into something else, something that left you questioning what had even just happened. Still. My thumb hovered over her name. Then I lowered the phone. Not yet. If this was connected, and I was starting to believe it was, then I couldn't afford to walk into it blind. By the time I got home, the house felt even emptier than the day before. Not just quiet. Absent. Like the walls themselves had started to forget what it sounded like to hold a family. I dropped my keys on the counter and stood there for a moment, staring at nothing. Then, almost without thinking, I walked to the hallway closet. Inside, tucked behind a stack of old board games, was a small lockbox. I pulled it out and set it on the kitchen table. It held documents, important ones. Adoption paperwork. Court records. Old correspondence. Things I hadn't needed to look at in a long time. Until now. The lock clicked open. I flipped through the file slowly, stopping when I found her name. Lena Carter. Even seeing it written out sent a faint tension through my chest. Our history hadn't been simple. When Ethan first came into the system, she had still been in the picture, technically. But inconsistent. Unpredictable. There were reports, missed visitations, conflicts with caseworkers. Nothing that made her a villain. But nothing that made her stable, either. I remembered one conversation clearly. It had been during the final stages of the adoption process. She'd requested a meeting, unexpected, urgent. We sat across from each other in a small office. You think you can just replace me? She'd asked. I'd kept my voice calm. That's not what this is. That's exactly what it is, she snapped. You walk in, sign some papers, and suddenly you're his father? I'm trying to give him a stable home, I said. That's all. Her eyes had locked onto mine then, sharp, searching. You think you know what's best for him? I think he deserves consistency. A long pause. Then she leaned back slightly, her expression shifting into something quieter. He's going to grow up, she said. He's going to ask questions. And when he does, what are you going to tell him about me? The truth, I said. She let out a soft, humorless laugh. Careful with that, she replied. Truth depends on who's telling it. At the time, I dismissed it as bitterness. Now, it didn't feel so simple. I spread the documents across the table, scanning dates, notes, anything that might connect to now. Then I saw it. A visitation request. Denied. 6 months ago. I frowned, trying to remember. That had been around the time she reached out again, more aggressively. Emails. Messages. A few calls I hadn't answered. I'd blocked the number eventually. For Ethan's sake. At least, that's what I told myself. But what if? I sat back slowly, the pieces starting to shift into a shape I didn't like. If she couldn't reach me, could she have reached him? The thought landed hard. School. Friends. Online access. I hadn't monitored everything. I couldn't. No parent could. And if she'd found a way in? If she'd started talking to him? Saying things? Planting ideas? I ran a hand over my face, the weight of it pressing in. No, I muttered. That's a stretch. But it didn't feel like one. Not after that message. Not after the way Ethan had spoken. Not after that look in his eyes. My phone buzzed suddenly, snapping me out of it. Another unknown number. I answered immediately. Hello? Mr. Reeves, this is Investigator Hale. My posture straightened instinctively. Did you find something? Not yet, he said. But I wanted to follow up on something you mentioned earlier, about the biological mother. My grip tightened slightly on the phone. What about her? We're reviewing communication records, he said. There are indications she may have attempted contact more recently than initially documented. My chest tightened. So she has been in contact with him. We're still verifying the extent, Hale replied. But it's something we're taking seriously. For the first time since this started, I felt something shift. Not relief. But direction. You need to look at that closely, I said. Because this didn't come out of nowhere. We intend to. A pause. Then, if you have any additional information, messages, records, anything at all, it could be helpful. I glanced down at the open lockbox, the scattered paperwork. I'll send you everything I have, I said. Good, Hale replied. We'll be in touch. The call ended. I set the phone down slowly. The house was still quiet. Still empty. But something had changed. For the first time since the knock at the door, this didn't feel completely random. There was a thread. Thin. Fragile. But real. And it led back to her. I looked at the email again. You should have let me be part of his life. My jaw tightened. No, I said quietly, the word steady now. This isn't about that. Because whatever this was, it wasn't just resentment. It was something more deliberate. And if I was right, then this wasn't just a misunderstanding. It was something that had been set in motion. And I was already behind it. The first crack didn't look like much. It wasn't dramatic. No sudden confession. No moment where everything flipped. It was just a pause. A hesitation buried inside a report most people would skim past. But I didn't skim. I couldn't afford to. 2 days later, I was back in the same building, sitting across from Investigator Hale again. This time, the file in front of him was thicker. That alone made my pulse quicken. "Thank you for coming in," he said, flipping it open. "We've made some progress." Progress. The word felt fragile. "What kind of progress?" I asked. Hale didn't answer right away. He turned a page, scanning something briefly before speaking. "We conducted a second structured interview with your son," he said. "A more detailed one." My chest tightened. "And?" He looked up. "There are inconsistencies." The word hit me harder than anything else so far. Not proof. Not resolution. But something close. "Inconsistencies how?" I asked, leaning forward. Hale tapped a section of the report. Certain details he provided earlier shifted, he said. Timelines changed. Sequences didn't fully align. I exhaled slowly, my hands tightening together. "That's what I've been saying," I said. It didn't sound real. It didn't sound like something he actually experienced. Hale didn't confirm that. But he didn't dismiss it either. "We're not drawing conclusions yet," he said carefully. "But discrepancies like this require closer examination." "Or common sense," I muttered. He ignored that. "There's something else," he added. My focus sharpened instantly. "What?" He flipped another page. "When asked open-ended questions, without prompts, your son struggled to describe events in his own words. A quiet, heavy silence filled the space between us. And when he was prompted?" I asked. "He provided more structured responses." Structured. There was that word again. I leaned back slightly, a cold clarity starting to settle in. "He's repeating something," I said. Hale met my eyes. "That is one possibility. Not confirmation. But not denial either." After the meeting, I didn't go home right away. I sat in my car, engine off, hands resting on the steering wheel, staring straight ahead. Inconsistencies. Structured responses. Struggled without prompts. Each phrase stacked on top of the other, forming something that finally resembled a break in the narrative. Not enough to fix anything. But enough to question it. And that mattered. Because up until now, no one had questioned anything. Later that afternoon, I got another call. This time, it wasn't Hale. "Mr. Reeves, this is Dr. Patel. I'm a child forensic specialist assigned to assist with the case." Her voice was calm, measured, but different from the others. More observant. "I reviewed the interview recordings," she continued. "I'd like to ask you a few background questions, if that's all right." "Of course," I said. "Anything." She asked about Ethan's personality. How he communicated. Whether he was suggestible. How he handled pressure, authority, emotional topics. I answered everything as clearly as I could. Then she asked something that made me pause. "Has he ever had a pattern of trying to please adults, even when uncertain?" I frowned slightly. "Yeah," I said slowly. "Especially when he first came to live with me. He didn't like disappointing people." "Did that change over time?" "A little," I said. "But not completely." She made a quiet note. "That's helpful," she said. I hesitated, then asked, "What are you seeing?" A brief pause. Then, "I need to be careful with how I phrase this." "I understand." Another pause. "I'm seeing indications that his responses may be influenced," she said. My grip tightened on the phone. "Influenced how?" "In some cases," she explained, "children adopt language or narratives that originate from external sources, especially if those sources are persistent or emotionally significant." I didn't speak. Because I already knew where this was going. "Have you identified a source?" I asked. "Not conclusively," she said. "But we are exploring all relevant relationships." Relevant relationships. Again, careful language. But now it carried weight. That evening, I sat at the kitchen table again, the same spot where everything had started to unravel days earlier. Only now. There was something different in the air. Not relief. But pressure shifting. The story wasn't solid anymore. It had cracks. Small ones. But growing. I replayed everything in my head. Ethan's hesitation. The way he avoided eye contact. The way his words felt. Placed. Not discovered. And now. Professionals were seeing it too. Not all of it. Not yet. But enough to start asking questions. Real ones. I leaned back in my chair, staring up at the ceiling. "Hold on," I murmured to myself. Because for the first time since this began, I wasn't just defending myself. The truth was starting to push back. And somewhere, beneath all of it, the version of Ethan I knew. The one who hesitated, who questioned, who needed reassurance. That version was still there. Still trying to surface. He just needed space to do it. And someone had to remove whatever was holding him down. By the time Dr. Patel agreed to meet in person, I had learned not to expect relief. Only shifts. Small ones. Careful ones. The kind that didn't fix anything, but changed the direction just enough to keep you going. Her office didn't feel like the others. It wasn't cold or clinical. There were books on the shelves, soft lighting, even a small plant by the window that looked like someone actually remembered to water it. It felt intentional. Like a place designed for people to talk. Dr. Patel greeted me with a firm but calm presence. Mid-30s, observant eyes, the kind that didn't just look at you, they studied you. Mr. Reeves, she said, motioning for me to sit. Thank you for coming. Thank you for seeing me, I replied. She didn't open with paperwork. Didn't start with a checklist. Instead, she sat across from me, hands loosely folded. I want to explain what I'm looking for, she said. So you understand how I'm approaching this. I nodded. When children describe experiences, she continued, we look at how those descriptions form. Not just what is said, but how it's said. The structure. The language. The consistency. I leaned forward slightly. And? She held my gaze. In your son's case. There are patterns that stand out. My chest tightened. What kind of patterns? She chose her words carefully. Some of his statements use phrasing that is unusually structured for his age, she said. Certain terms appear repeated in the same way across multiple tellings. Like he memorized them, I said. She didn't confirm it directly. But she didn't deny it either. In addition, she continued, when asked to describe events freely, without guidance, his responses become less detailed. Less stable. I exhaled slowly. That's what Hale said. She nodded. Yes. And it aligns with what we sometimes see when a child is trying to maintain a narrative that didn't originate entirely from their own experience. The words settled heavily between us. Not proof. But closer. Closer than anything so far. Do you believe him? I asked quietly. Dr. Patel didn't hesitate, but her answer wasn't simple. I believe he believes he needs to say what he's saying, she replied. That sentence stayed with me. Because it wasn't about truth or lies. It was about pressure. She reached for a folder beside her and opened it, not fully, just enough to glance at a few notes. There's something else, she said. My focus sharpened. We conducted a third session, she explained. This time with adjusted questioning techniques, minimizing reinforcement, removing leading structure. And, for a brief period, she said, his responses changed. My pulse quickened. How? He hesitated more, she said. Expressed uncertainty. At one point, he said, I don't remember it like that. The room felt smaller. He said that? I asked. Yes. I ran a hand over my face, trying to steady myself. That's it, I said. That's what I've been trying to explain. That's him. That's how he talks when he's unsure. Dr. Patel watched me closely. There's more, she said. I froze slightly. What? She hesitated, just briefly. During that same session, she continued, he referenced conversations with another adult. Everything in me went still. What kind of conversations? He described being told certain things repeatedly, she said. Being reminded of how to explain them. Being encouraged to be clear and not change the story. My hands clenched without me realizing it. Did he say who? I asked. Dr. Patel held my gaze. He mentioned his biological mother. The words landed like a quiet explosion. Not loud. Not chaotic. But undeniable. For a moment, I couldn't speak. Everything I'd been circling, every instinct, every suspicion, suddenly had shape. Not confirmed. But no longer hypothetical. She's been talking to him, I said slowly. We are still verifying the extent of that contact, Dr. Patel replied. But the reference is significant. Significant? I repeated, a sharp edge creeping into my voice. It's everything. I understand how it feels, she said calmly. But we need to proceed carefully. These situations require precision. Precision. Always that careful balance. Meanwhile, my life had already been torn apart. I stood up, pacing once across the room before forcing myself to stop. He's been coached, I said. That's what this is. That's why it sounds the way it does. That's why it doesn't hold up when you push on it. Dr. Patel didn't interrupt. Because now. She didn't need to. I need to see him, I said, turning back to her. He needs to hear from me. Not from whoever's been putting this in his head. That's not something I can authorize, she said gently. Frustration surged again, but weaker this time, because underneath it, something stronger had taken hold. Clarity. They're going to find out, I said. Her expression didn't change. We're continuing the evaluation, she replied. And the inconsistencies are being documented. I nodded slowly. Because for the first time. This didn't feel like I was shouting into nothing. Someone else could see it. Someone trained to see it. When I stepped outside, the air felt different. Still cold. Still heavy. But not suffocating. I stood there for a moment, letting the silence settle around me. Then I pulled out my phone and opened that message again. You should have let me be part of his life. I stared at it, my jaw tightening. You didn't just want to be part of it, I said under my breath. You wanted control. Because this wasn't random. It wasn't confusion. It was influence. Repeated. Reinforced. Directed. And now. It was starting to come undone. Not all at once. But piece by piece. And if Ethan had already started to hesitate. If even a small part of him was pushing back. Then the rest wouldn't hold forever. It couldn't. Because the truth didn't need to be memorized. It just needed space. And that space was finally beginning to open. The shift didn't feel dramatic. No sudden phone call. No one rushing to my door with answers. It came quietly, like everything else in this process. But this time, it carried weight. 3 days after my meeting with Dr. Patel, Investigator Hale called again. "Mr. Reeves," he said, his tone more focused than before, "we need you to come in." That was it. No explanation. Just that. And somehow, I knew, this was different. When I arrived, the atmosphere had changed. Subtly. But enough. The receptionist didn't make small talk this time. The hallway felt more active. Doors opening and closing. Voices lower, more deliberate. Something was moving. Hale was already waiting in the room when I stepped in, but he wasn't alone. Another woman sat beside him, laptop open, a folder spread out in front of her. She looked up briefly as I entered, then back down at the screen. "Have a seat," Hale said. I did. The air felt tighter than usual. Controlled, but charged. Hale folded his hands on the table. "We've uncovered additional information," he said. My focus locked onto him. "What kind of information?" He glanced at the woman beside him, then back at me. "Communication records," he said. "Between your son and his biological mother." There it was. Not a theory. Not a possibility. Something real. "How?" I asked. "I blocked her." "You blocked her from your devices," Hale clarified. "But there were other points of access." My mind moved quickly. "School," I said. Hale gave a slight nod. "Partially. We've confirmed contact through a secondary messaging platform, one not previously disclosed." A cold feeling settled in my chest. "She was talking to him," I said. "Yes." The word didn't come with hesitation this time. The woman beside him turned her laptop slightly, though not enough for me to fully see. "We've reviewed a portion of the exchanges," she said. "There are patterns that raise concern." "What kind of patterns?" I asked. She glanced at Hale briefly, then continued. "Repeated discussions about you," she said. "Framed in a negative light. Statements suggesting he needed to tell the truth about things that were described to him." My hands clenched under the table. "Described to him," I repeated. "Yes," she said. "Not recalled, introduced." The distinction hit hard. Hale leaned forward slightly. "There are also instances," he added, "where she appears to correct his wording. Encouraging consistency. Reinforcing specific phrasing." My chest tightened. "Like coaching," I said. Neither of them used the word. But neither of them disagreed. The room fell quiet for a moment. Not empty, just heavy with what had just been placed on the table. "Why wasn't this found earlier?" I asked. "We didn't initially have access to that channel," Hale said. "It required additional authorization." "And now?" "Now we do." I leaned back slightly, trying to process it. This was it. The thread I'd been holding onto. It wasn't just real. It was leading somewhere. "There's more," Hale said. I looked at him immediately. "What?" He opened the file again, turning it toward himself. "The timing of the communication aligns closely with the initial report," he said. "Increased frequency. More directive language." My jaw tightened. So right before he said it. Yes. The word landed firmly. No hesitation. No caution. Just fact. For a moment, I couldn't speak. Not because I didn't have anything to say. But because everything I'd been carrying finally had somewhere to go. "This changes everything," I said. Hale didn't rush to agree. But his expression had shifted. "It changes the direction of the investigation," he said. That was enough. The woman closed her laptop softly. "We're continuing to analyze the full scope of communication," she said. "But what we've seen so far is significant." Significant. The word felt too small. But I understood why they used it. Careful. Measured. Always. Even now. "What happens next?" I asked. Hale sat back slightly. "We proceed with verification," he said. "Cross-referencing statements. Conducting follow-up interviews." "With him?" "Yes." I nodded slowly. Because now, those interviews weren't just about confirming an accusation. They were about testing its foundation. And that foundation was starting to crack. When I left the building, I didn't go straight to my car. I stopped on the sidewalk, the same place I'd stood days earlier when all I had was confusion and instinct. Now, I had something else. Evidence. Not complete. Not final. But real. I pulled out my phone again, opening that message one more time. "You should have let me be part of his life." I stared at it, seeing it differently now. Not as a complaint. Not as regret. But as something closer to intent. "You didn't just want to be part of it," I said quietly. "You wanted to rewrite it." Because that's what this was. Not influence. Not misunderstanding. Something more deliberate. More controlled. And now, it was exposed. Not fully. Not yet. But enough. Enough to shift everything. Enough to start pulling the truth out from under everything that had been built on top of it. And for the first time since this began, I wasn't waiting for things to happen to me. I was watching them unfold. And this time, They were moving in the right direction. By the time they called me back in, I could feel it. Not hope. Something sharper. Like the air before a storm finally breaks. "Mr. Reeves," Hale said over the phone, "we've completed another interview." I stood up before he even finished the sentence. "And?" A brief pause. "You should come in." That was all I needed to hear. The room felt different again. Not warmer. Not calmer. But more defined. Like the uncertainty that used to fill every corner had started to collapse into something clearer, something that could finally be examined. Hale sat across from me, file open. Dr. Patel was there too this time, seated slightly to the side, her presence quiet but steady. No small talk. No delay. "It shifted," Hale said. My pulse jumped. "What shifted?" He looked at me directly. "Your son's account." The words landed, but I didn't react yet. Not until I understood. "How?" I asked. Dr. Patel spoke this time. "In the latest session," she said, "we removed all external reinforcement. No prompting, no corrective language, no repetition of prior phrasing." I nodded slightly, following. "And?" She held my gaze. He struggled to maintain the narrative. The room went still. Not dramatic. Just still. "Struggled how?" I asked, my voice lower now. Hale flipped a page. He contradicted earlier details, he said. Changed sequences. Expressed uncertainty about events he previously described with confidence. I exhaled slowly. "That's not a small inconsistency," I said. "No," Hale agreed. "It's not." Dr. Patel leaned forward slightly. "At one point," she added, he stopped mid-response and said, "That's not how I remember it." I closed my eyes briefly. There it was again. That moment. That hesitation. That him. "What happened after that?" I asked. "He became quieter," she said. "Less certain. More reflective." Hale picked up from there. "When we asked where he first heard certain descriptions," he said, "he initially avoided the question." "Initially?" I pressed. Hale didn't rush. He eventually acknowledged that some of the wording came from conversations with his biological mother. The words didn't hit like a shock this time. They settled. Because I had already known. Somewhere deep down, I had known. I leaned back in my chair, my hands pressing lightly against my knees, grounding myself. "So he said it," I said quietly. "He actually said it." "Yes," Hale confirmed. No hesitation. No softening. Just fact. The silence that followed felt different from all the others. Not empty. Not heavy. But shifting, like something that had been locked in place was finally starting to move. "Is he okay?" I asked after a moment. Dr. Patel answered. "He's processing," she said. "This is not easy for him either." I nodded slowly. Of course it wasn't. Whatever had been put on him, whatever pressure, whatever influence. He had been carrying it alone. "There's more," Hale said. I looked up again. "What?" He indicated that he was told repeating the same wording was important, Hale said. That consistency would make people understand. My jaw tightened. Make people understand what? I asked. Hale met my eyes. A version of events that aligns with what he had been told. There it was. Not confusion. Not misinterpretation. Direction. I stood up slowly, pacing once before stopping again. "This whole thing," I said, shaking my head slightly. "It was built. Piece by piece." No one argued. Because now. They didn't need to. "What happens now?" I asked, turning back to them. Hale closed the file gently. "We complete the documentation," he said. "Submit findings. Reevaluate the initial claim based on the full context." "How long?" "Soon," he said. This time. It didn't sound empty. Dr. Patel watched me for a moment before speaking again. "There's something important to understand," she said. "Your son wasn't trying to cause harm. He was trying to navigate something he didn't fully understand." "I know," I said quietly. And I did. Because I had seen it. From the beginning. That hesitation. That uncertainty. That wasn't deception. That was conflict. I stepped outside again, the air hitting my face sharper than before. But this time. It didn't feel heavy. It felt clear. Like something had finally broken open. I pulled out my phone, staring at the same message one last time. "You should have let me be part of his life." I exhaled slowly. "You didn't just step in," I murmured. "You interfered." Because now. There was no question left. The words. The timing. The repetition. It all led back to the same place. And it had finally reached a point where it couldn't hold anymore. As I stood there, one thought settled in, steady, undeniable. The truth hadn't just been found. It had forced its way out. And now. There was only one thing left. To see what was still standing when everything false fell away. The call came in the afternoon. No build-up. No warning. Just a name on my screen I had stared at too many times over the past days. "Hale." I answered before the second ring. "Mr. Reeves," he said, his tone steady, but different. Not distant. Not neutral. Resolved. "We've completed our review." My grip tightened around the phone. And? A pause. Not long. Just enough to make the moment land. The allegation is unsubstantiated. The words didn't hit all at once. They moved through me slowly, like something unlocking piece by piece. Unsubstantiated. Not supported. Not holding. Gone. I closed my eyes, exhaling a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding since the morning everything started. So that's it? I asked quietly. It means the case against you is no longer being pursued, Hale said. Arrangements are being made for your children to return home. Home. The word felt unfamiliar for a second. Like something I had to relearn. When? I asked. Today. I don't remember the drive. Not clearly. Just fragments. Traffic lights. Turns I didn't consciously make. The sound of my own heartbeat, louder than anything else. By the time I reached the building, my hands were steady, but everything inside me wasn't. A caseworker met me at the entrance. They're inside, she said. That was all I needed. The room was simple. Neutral walls. A few chairs. Nothing personal. And then. Movement. My youngest saw me first. Dad. She ran straight into me, arms wrapping tight around my waist. I dropped to my knees instantly, holding her just as tightly. I've got you, I said, my voice breaking despite everything I tried to control. I've got you. My middle child followed, quieter but just as fast, pressing into my side like they were making sure I was real. I'm here, I told them. It's okay. I'm right here. And for a moment. That was all that mattered. Then I saw him. Ethan stood a few steps back. Still. Watching. Not distant this time. Not closed off. Just. Unsure. Like he didn't know where he stood anymore. I stood up slowly. The room seemed to quiet around us, everything narrowing down to that space between me and him. Hey, I said gently. He didn't move. Didn't speak. I took a step closer, but not too close. I'm here, I said. His eyes flickered up to mine. And this time. There was no script. No structure. Just emotion. He started, then stopped. His voice faltered. I didn't know what to do. The words came out small. Real. And that was all I needed to hear. I know, I said. Because I did. Not every detail. Not every moment, but enough. Enough to understand that whatever had been put on him. He hadn't built it alone. I should have. He started again, then shook his head, unable to finish. You don't have to explain it right now, I said. We'll figure everything out. One step at a time. He nodded slightly. Not fully steady. But trying. And that mattered. The drive home was quiet. Not uncomfortable. Just. Careful. Like we were all stepping back into something that had been broken and didn't quite fit the same way yet. The house looked exactly as I'd left it. Same door. Same windows. But when we walked inside. It felt different. Not empty anymore. But not whole either. That night, after the kids had settled, after the house had found some version of its old rhythm again, I sat alone in the living room. The same spot. The same silence. But now it carried something new. Perspective. I picked up my phone, scrolling past missed calls, messages, notifications that no longer mattered. Then I stopped. That email. Still there. You should have let me be part of his life. I stared at it for a long moment. Then locked my phone and set it down. Because whatever she had tried to do. Whatever she had set in motion. It had failed. Not cleanly. Not without damage. But it hadn't held. I leaned back, looking around the room. The toys. The scattered books. The signs of life returning. And yet. Something inside me had changed. Because vindication doesn't erase what happened. It doesn't rewind the moment your children are taken from you. It doesn't silence the echo of words that should never have existed in your life. It just. Stops the fall. From down the hall, I heard movement. A door opening slightly. Soft footsteps. Then. Dad? I turned. Ethan stood there. Not far this time. Not distant. Yeah? I said. He hesitated. Then stepped a little closer. Can I sit? I nodded. Of course. He sat beside me, not saying anything at first. Just. Being there. And after everything. That was enough. Because the truth had come out. The case was over. My children were home. But the story. The real one. Wasn't finished. Not yet. Not even close.